would lay down my life for any child of Will and Tessa. No hesitation. Hello everybody, it's Katie here. I have finally finished Chain of Iron. It took me just under 2 weeks, but I was purposefully being slow with my reading of it so that I could savour every moment. Because, you know, now we've got to wait a whole year to find out what happens next. So I didn't storm through it the way I usually would with an anticipated sequel, but I'm done and I'm here to discuss. I have not taken a single note for this video. I'm literally just jumping right in, and I'm sure I will regret that in 10 minutes when I haven't got a clue what I am talking about. As always with my discussion videos, I will do a little spoiler-free section to just give you an overview of my general thoughts on the book, and then I will delve into everything else. So for those of you who haven't yet read the book, if you've read Chain of Gold, which I'm going to assume you have. If you haven't, I'm going to spoil the ending for you, so... James and Cordelia embarked on a fake engagement in order to save James from being arrested for arson and to save Cordelia's reputation, which he so willingly threw under the bus for James. So Chain of Iron picks up literally just before their wedding, which did surprise me a little because I was expecting more of the engagements, but no, we're just thrown right in at the wedding. Good times. So we join these characters just as they prepare for James and Cordelia's wedding. This book is very like Chain of Gold in that it's not too fast paced. I think everything sort of slowly plods along, feeding you just little bits of ominous information throughout the story, and then it all comes to a head in like the final quarter of the book, and it's non-stop from that point on. The story is about a series of murders that are taking place. Shadow hunters are turning up dead, and so throughout the story the characters are trying to figure out who's responsible for the murder, and that mystery aspect of the story I really enjoyed because I too was trying to figure it out, and I was coming up with lots of theories that were all completely wrong. We get to learn a lot more about some of the characters that we didn't find out too much about in the first book. Characters like Grace, we get more of her backstory, so we come to understand a bit more why she is the way that she is. We also see a further downward spiral for Matthew Fairchild, which is utterly heartbreaking to read about, but I think it's such an important part of the story. There were a few little things that I had issues with, but I can't really talk about them in a spoiler-free review. Everything else I completely adored. I was terrified going into this book because second books in trilogies are usually the ones that I don't enjoy as much, unless it's Catching Fire, which is a god tier story. But when I was reading TDA, it was Lord of Shadows where the story disappointed me, and that's kind of where I lost enthusiasm for the trilogy. But there was none of that with this book. All it did was further cement the fact that I love these characters and this story. So yeah, that's about all I can think of to say spoiler-free wise. If you prefer really fast-paced books, then you might find this one a little slow. But if you enjoy character-driven stories, multiple points of view, getting to know lots of different characters, then you will enjoy this one. So if you haven't yet read the book, then please close the video and come back to it when you have, and we can discuss all the things. Hello everyone that has read Chain of Iron. How much did you hate that ending? I know I'm jumping right in at the end, but Jesus Christ! Have you ever read such an angsty ending? The terrible timing. Oh my god, it drove me insane. You know in like movies where the characters are trying to like find each other and then they end up on the same street but like a minute apart, and it drives you crazy because they're right there? It was like that moment. Cordelia coming down the stairs whilst Grace is hugging James and hearing just one bit of the conversation. Oh my god. I'd have happily thrown the book across the room at that moment. I'm devastated. So moving away from the ending, let's try and go to the start. I don't even know where to start. So much happened in this book. Let's start with Cordelia and James and the fake wedding. So for those of you who don't know, I love fake relationship stories. That trope will get me every single time. So when Chain of Gold ended in a fake engagement, I was all about that shit. I was so excited for a fake wedding in this book. It didn't exactly go as I planned. It was so painful. It wasn't fun at all. It hurt. I wanted James and Cordelia to be happy. I mean, it had everything that I wanted. It had the forced close proximity. It had those moments where they started questioning. When James was slowly starting to break free from that goddamn bracelet. It had all of that, but it also had moments of pure pain where I just felt so sorry for Cordelia. I'm really enjoying their relationship in this trilogy though, and I'm glad about that because they are the main romance. And a lot of the time I end up preferring the side romance to the main one. Whereas in this trilogy, I actually do adore James and Cordelia. They've got the childhood friends thing going on, and we got to see through the Grace flashbacks in this book that James did utterly adore Cordelia from a young age. So they have a great friendship, and I'm glad that that got to shine through in this book. So even though this marriage was a fake one, they made a great team anyway. I absolutely adored the scenes of them at home when they would play games with each other in order to win a question from the other one. I absolutely loved that aspect of the book, and I hope that maybe we get to use that a little bit in the last book as well. What a great way to confess love through winning a game of chess. So yeah, even though it was painful, I still enjoyed the fake marriage. So let's talk about Grace and her involvement in this fake marriage. Grace Blackthorne. So I still don't like her character very much. I didn't like her in Chain of Gold. In fact, I couldn't stand her in Chain of Gold. I'm tolerating her now. I do like her a bit more. I'm very glad that we got to see flashbacks from her point of view. So we got some sort of explanation as to why she is the way that she is. But I'm still not fully sold on her character. I think she's got a little bit more redeeming to do. I was warming to her, but then at the end, she still went to use James to get her out of the situation that she's in. I mean, I know she's not to blame for the situation that she's in, but she still went to use James as an escape plan. And you know, I can't fully blame her for that, but I didn't like it. But yeah, I'm very glad that we got to see more of her in this book because I didn't know what her deal was in Chain of Gold. Now we know fully the power that she has, where she got it, how it hasn't been working on James, which is why she's got the bracelet. I do really sympathise for her situation because although she knows that what she's doing is wrong, she's still doing it without question because she knows that whatever's going on with Tatiana, it's to help Jessie. At least that's what she thought. So she went along with whatever Tatiana wanted her to do. I really, really appreciated the flashback scenes between Jessie and Grace so that we could see a lot of their bond, which helps explain why Grace is so desperate to help her brother. Even though they're not really related, they feel like siblings. Can we talk about Tatiana at the end of the book wanting Grace to go and seduce Jessie? Why? Why? Why was that necessary? I mean, I guess it does show that Tatiana is completely insane, and at least Grace responded with repulsion. I just hope to God that that's not a thing that actually happens in Chain of Thorns. If Grace Blackthorne ends up coming in between Lucy and Jessie, I swear to God. Please, please, I don't care if they're adopted. Can we stop with the weird sibling relationships? I'm tired, Cassandra. I'm tired. So yeah, anyway, I liked that we got to see more about Grace. I do feel sorry for her. I'd just like to get to know her a little better outside of all the messed up stuff that's going on. I did appreciate her, not so much friendship with Lucy, but partnership as they work together to try and help Jessie. I was hoping we'd get to see them become more friends in this book, so that Grace had somebody that she was friends with outside of James, because I feel like she really needs that in order for her to fully break away from Tatiana's grip. So we had a couple of scenes between her and Christopher in this book, and I know that on the fan family tree she is listed as being married to Christopher, and I know that tree isn't accurate because everything's going to get messed up in this last book and we're going to find out the true family tree, but I still think they're going to end up together somehow. And we got little glimpses of something forming between them in this book, but again, I don't think it was enough. I would have liked more, because that was also one of the issues that I did have with the book, is that I still feel like we're lacking Christopher. Christopher Lightwood is the one out of the 4 boys that I feel like I don't know that well, and it's annoying because whenever we do get content of his, I absolutely adore him. I think there's so much more about him to learn. He seems like he has a wild life. So I definitely appreciate more scenes of him, not just with Grace, but with the other characters as well. Give him some scenes alone with Thomas, or with James, or Matthew, because I feel like when we do see him, we only see him with everybody. And I'd like some more one-on-one scenes. Throw in some scenes with Anna, because honestly, I forget that they're siblings. I always forget and end up thinking that Thomas is Anna's brother, because they seem to have a more sibling-like relationship than her and Christopher. So yeah, just give Christopher more scenes. So I want to talk about Matthew. Poor Matthew Fairchild. I mean, we kind of knew that his story was going to be heartbreaking from Chain of Gold, but God, I just want to give that boy a hug. His spiral with alcoholism is genuinely heartbreaking, and as somebody who's seen what it's like to watch a loved one battle with alcoholism, that part of the story really did get to me. And before we delve into Matthew's side of things, I do want to talk about Cordelia's father. I am quite sad that he was murdered before Cordelia and Alistair got to build any sort of bridges with him, but I definitely like how Cassie showed the different reactions to him being back in their lives, because for Alistair, he's the one that's been aware of what their dad is going through, and so he has a lot more bitterness towards him, whereas Cordelia is still very confused because she's only just recently learned about the whole situation, and so she doesn't really know how to react. And I like that she still loved her dad, but she also didn't know how to feel about him being back in their lives. So I did enjoy that contrast in their reactions. And another major part of the story for me was their grief when their father died. I mentioned on my channel at the start of the year that my dad passed away last year, so I've been finding that reading stories that contain the loss of a parent has actually been quite healing for me. And I know a lot of people would prefer to avoid that subject when they've gone through it, but for me, books have always been a comfort. Whatever I'm going through in my life, I always try and find stories that deal with similar subjects. I like to find characters that I can relate to, and I end up taking comfort in that. So the aftermath of that loss was something that I found really important to read. So moving back to Matthew, his alcoholism is still a major issue in this book. Cordelia is the one to find out why Matthew hates himself so much. On one hand, I'm quite sad that he felt like he couldn't tell James first, but on the other, I can understand why he'd tell Cordelia, because she's somebody who's more recently joined their friendship group. She's more of an unbiased outside view on things, and I really loved her reaction to it. I do hope that he gets to fully deal with his problems in the last book of this trilogy, because I really don't want him to have a tragic ending. I really want to see him overcome his personal demons. He's such a fantastic character. He's so entertaining. He has all of the funny lines in the book, but everything he does always has a shadow to it. You'll be enjoying him cracking jokes in a scene, and then he'll take out his flask and it all comes crashing down. So it's heartbreaking, but it is also important, because this is a problem that isn't related to the magic in the world. It's not a Shadowhunter problem, it's a human problem, and it's a problem that so many people face. So the main issue that I have with the story is one that I knew I was going to have going into it anyway, and that is Matthew's feelings for Cordelia. It was hinted at in Chain of Gold, and In this book, he admits that he's in love with Cordelia. I really didn't want this to be a thing. We've already been through two parabatai being in love with the same girl in the Infernal Devices, and that was such a wonderful story. I really don't think it's necessary to go through that again. Even though these characters are very different and so is the situation, it's nothing like Will, Tessa and Jem, but it is still two parabatai being in love with one person. I just don't want to go through that again. It's quite predictable. I mean, honestly, I don't think any love interest for Matthew is necessary because he has a lot that he has to sort out in his life, let alone his love life. The main problem that I have with it isn't that it's a love triangle, because we really don't know Cordelia's feelings on Matthew that much, I don't think. I mean, she's had moments where she spoke about how beautiful he is and stuff, but we still don't have a proper look into her feelings for him. But my main issue is that it doesn't feel very real to me when it comes to Matthew being in love with Cordelia. Even though it's been hinting at it the whole time, it still feels out of the blue. I think the main problem is that the story just tells us that Matthew's in love with Cordelia. It doesn't really show that he is. At least that's how it feels to me. It tells you that he cares about her a lot. It tells you that his heart's clearly racing when he's around her, that he's jealous that James gets to be married to Cordelia whilst not actually being in love with her. And it tells us that Matthew is in love with Cordelia, but I don't feel like we see it. Even though they have plenty of scenes in the book, especially that drive where they go to see Wayland Smith, who isn't actually Wayland Smith. Whilst I enjoyed seeing them bond, I still don't think it did a very good job of showing the fact that there is a romantic connection there. And I don't know whether Cassie intended for it to come across that way, but I don't feel the connection at all. But I do really love their friendship. I did enjoy those casual scenes between them in the book, and I can't wait to see what they get up to in Paris. I'm excited to know how it changes things. Personally, I don't think Cordelia is ever going to have romantic feelings for Matthew, and I feel like maybe he's going to realise that in Paris. But I don't know, we'll see how it goes. I just ship Matthew with happiness. So I want to quickly talk about the other characters as well, because I spent so long talking about everyone else. There's just too much content in this book. My throat is hurting. So Alistair, I love him. I love him. It's just funny how I really didn't like him in the first half of Chain of Gold, and then the more I learnt about him, the more I just adored him. And then in this book, he is one of my favourites. He's short and snarky and sarcastic, and I like characters like that very much. I love that we got to see more nice moments between him and Cordelia in this book, because in Chain of Gold it felt like they were butting heads a lot, because Alistair had his walls up and he was just really angry. Whereas in this, he's just less angry. I love how he has genuinely taken himself out of the toxic environment with Charles. Although there was that moment at the end where Charles was asking for him and he went to him, but like he did that because, you know, he's a nice person. He's not going to just like leave Charles there in a hospital bed, but it feels like he's starting to do what's right for him. He's trying to make up for the things that he did when he was younger. So I enjoyed getting to see him redeem himself, really. I love the relationship between him and Thomas, because Thomas is just so tall and soft, and he's the exact opposite of Alistair. So of course I'm going to ship them. Having them get put in prison, it wasn't really prison, it was the sanctuary, but having them locked up together was such a fantastic way of getting them to open up to each other, get their feelings out there. That whole scene was adorable. Of course I expected the angst afterwards, and I'm not happy with that, but I'm happy with the way they got to connect in this book. So I have no complaints about their part of the story. My other favourite relationship in this book, I love every relationship in this book, which is great. That doesn't happen often, but here we are. Lucy and Jessie. You don't need me to tell you how much I love Lucy Herondale. I made that very clear in my Chain of Gold video last year. She's absolutely one of my favourite characters. I adore her. Her relationship with Jessie, I adore. Ghost and human relationships. I have a weakness for ghost and human relationships that was created by Meg Cabot with the Mediator series back in the early 2000s. Lucy's determination to help Jesse throughout the book, my heart shattered at times, especially when he was clearly getting weaker and fading more. And now she's managed to bring him back to life, and that's going to unleash a whole load of new fuckery, and I'm terrified about what the future holds for them. But I'm very excited for Jesse to actually be human, I think, in the final book. I knew he was going to get resurrected somehow. I just didn't know when, but I was really hoping that it would be in the second book so that we could see him interact with the other characters in the last book. And I am predicting that that's going to happen whenever they get found from where they've been taken with Malcolm. Let's talk about Malcolm, shall we? So yeah, Grace and Lucy are responsible for everything that happens in the Dark Artifices, basically. So Grace is the one who tells Malcolm that Annabelle Blackthorne is dead. So this is where his journey with necromancy starts. Yeah, that was an ominous part of the book, because of course we know what happens in his future. So seeing its humble beginnings, yikes! It's just the fact that at one point he was literally telling Lucy how dangerous it was to play around with necromancy and how awful it is and how morally wrong and how he would never do that. I wish he'd kept that frame of mind, let me tell you. So other characters that I haven't mentioned yet. Anna, my other favourite. I'm glad that we got more scenes of her with the other characters in this book, because it kind of felt like she was outside of the little gang in Chain of Gold, whereas in Chain of Iron she's more involved with them. So we get to finally see what's going on between her and Ariadne in this book. So Ariadne reveals her actual birth name, but because Ariadne is the name that she uses throughout Chain of Iron, I'm going to keep calling her Ariadne for now. Their relationship breaks my heart a little bit, because I hate seeing the walls that Anna's put up around herself to protect herself from falling in love, but I also understand why she's done that. And their situation is so heartbreaking, and I just desperately hope that they find a way to make it work. One thing I always see a lot of people discussing when it comes to this series is how Anna seems to have an easier time of things in 1903 than Alec did when The Mortal Instruments was first released. Can I just remind people that that series was released in 2007 and that the publishing industry was a lot more of a different place back then than it is now? And newsflash, gay people have always existed, even in Edwardian England. The only reason she seems to be having an easier time of things is because she has a very close group of friends who literally don't care about that. They are a very accepting bunch of people. We only see her little world with them. We're not seeing the wider opinions at the moment. Maybe we will in the final book. But right now it's not focused on the Clave and their laws and their opinions. It focuses very much on our little team of characters. So the reason why Anna's having an easier time than Alec is because she has great friends. Not that Alec didn't, but in The Mortal Instruments it is more focused on the Clave and the pressure that they put on Shadowhunters. And so that's why the difference is there. But anyway, rant aside, I absolutely love Anna. I feel like we still don't know too much about Ariadne, but I respect the hell out of her for how determined she was to win Anna back in this book. The fact that she comes up to her at every formal function and asks her to dance. Absolute iconic queen, let me tell you. So I'm going to try and wrap things up now because I've been waffling on for far too long. I feel like I haven't actually even touched upon the main plot. I've just been talking about the characters. So Lilith was the surprise villain in this book. Yeah, didn't see that one coming. I thought we were actually meeting Waylon the Smith. I was so excited. I was like, oh, this man who's been mentioned in all of these books, we're finally gonna see him. No, it's Lilith, and she's got her claws into Cordelia, and that's going to cause a lot of problems, because now Cordelia is too scared to even pick up a weapon. She no longer wants to be parabatai with Lucy because of that. My heart is broken. That's another little issue that I have with this book, is that we didn't have as much Cordelia and Lucy, which is understandable because Cordelia is married to James now and Lucy was dabbling with necromancy. So, you know, they both had a lot going on, but I definitely missed their friendship in this book. And you can see little bits of tension when they realise that they've been hiding things from each other. So yeah, that hurt. But Lilith popped up in the story, and yeah, I wasn't expecting it. Although we did get hints earlier on in the book when Magnus, who wasn't Magnus, was talking about Lilith, but he was actually Lilith, so it was just her talking about herself. So yeah, that was a thing. I love the whole story with Belial and the other princes of hell. Is it Belial? Belial? I don't know. I say Belial in my head, so that's what's coming out. Him and Tatiana are still up to no good. She's stolen the Iron Key. Is it called the Iron Key? Oh no, the key to the Iron Tombs. I'm terrified for whatever they're going to get up to in Chain of Thorns. So yeah, overall, I thought this was a great middle story. Definitely focused more on the characters. I was happy to see Infernal Devices characters again, especially Will and Tessa. So honestly, I just adored this story. I did have little issues here and there, but they weren't major problems. I still loved everything else. I'm really excited for Chain of Thorns. I have no idea what's going to happen. I'm terrible at coming up with theories, so I guess I'll just wait and find out. As always, I know there's lots of things that I forgot to talk about, so please feel free to drop all of your thoughts down in the comments. Tell me what you thought of the book. Did it live up to your expectations? Who are your favourite characters? What do you want to happen in Chain of Thorns? Let me know. All the Shadowhunter related things. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you next time. Bye!